Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the We Are podcast. My name is Celine Bono. So, this episode is going to be very different than our normal ones since it's a solo episode. If you guys don't know, Hannah and I actually recently graduated high school and we're both in college now. Yay! I definitely want to make an episode about that later on, just like the college adjustment period, like kind of what goes into the process of starting college, what that looks like, how to deal with homesickness, all sorts of things. So definitely I'll be covering that later on. Anyways, we decided to create a new schedule. So each week, one of us is going to record an episode about a different topic. So same types of topics though, like news updates, like interviews, stuff like that, like relevant social issues. But we just figured since we're in college, like it's a lot busier and it'll give us time to create more quality episodes if each one of us is doing it every 2 weeks, and that way we can still put out episodes every week. And then when there's break time, so like winter break and Thanksgiving break, we're going to meet up together and do episodes together like we always do. So this is kind of new for me. I haven't done a solo episode since I think honestly, like freshman year of high school. It's been a long time, and it's going to be very different to not have Ahana being there to like talk to me about these things. So yeah, this is totally new, but I'm curious to see how it goes. So today's episode is actually about the Evergreen high school shooting. So this was such a horrible, tragic event. I just want to say before I begin, like, trigger warning to anyone who might feel like they'll be triggered by the discussion of violence, gun violence especially. It's such a difficult topic and it can bring up so many different emotions. Even just doing research, it was so hard to like read the stories. It's important to talk about and it's important to learn about, but it's also very hard to hear. So I just want to like make sure that like just to validate like how difficult this is. And then if anyone has any family members or friends who are involved in the shooting, I'm so sorry. This is not something that should happen in our world at all. And I think we all deserve better than this. So let's get into kind of the details of what happened that day. So it took place on Wednesday, September 10th at Evergreen High School. So as a lot of you guys probably know, this was the same day as the Charlie Kirk shooting, and that shooting immediately got so much coverage on social media. Everyone was talking about it. There were so many news articles about it, and I feel like this almost got swept under the rug a little bit. It was just kind of minimized because there was this sensationalized event happening with this like almost celebrity, like a very well-known person. So everyone was talking about Charlie Kirk shooting, yet there wasn't a ton of attention on the school shooting where these innocent children were shot. So I think it's so important to talk about these things, like even if not everyone on social media is talking about it, even if it's not being covered as much on news platforms as it should be, it's so important to learn and to research and to talk about these things. This was actually the 47th shooting to take place at a school this year. I mean, just that statistic alone is just horrifying when you think about it. Like, it's like the fact that there have been 47 school shootings already in the year. Like, I feel like that's such a fact that's like hard to come to terms with, because it's like, oh, there's no way that can be real, but it is real, and that's terrifying. So the shooter was later identified as Desmond Hawley. He was a 16-year-old, and he took the school bus the morning of the shooting carrying ammunition. So the shooting began at around like 12:20, 24-ish, when the shooter went around campus loading and reloading, and he shot 20 rounds in about 9 minutes. So it started inside the school, and he shot a student inside the school, and then he was shooting at the windows and lockers. A lot of people spoke out about what that experience was like a lot of survivors, and it just was like so incredibly traumatizing. People were texting their families like, there's a shooting, like this is real, and the parents were freaking out, and it was just terrifying, and like everyone was so scared and unsure whether they were going to make it out of this alive. So the school, like the doors were locked because like this was like something that they had practiced before, like locking the doors, like a lockdown drill, like a shooter drill, which is unfortunately a reality of our society. Like, we do have to do active shooter drills in schools, and that shouldn't be the way that it is, but thankfully the school did take the preventative measures to lock the doors, and they had like already practiced that, and that ended up saving lives because the shooter was not able to enter any more classrooms. So then he stepped outside of the building and crossed the football team or the football field and struck another student. So deputies were dispatched pretty soon after this, so they responded to the incident pretty quickly, and they made contact with the suspect in less than 5 minutes. And the shooter suffered from a self-inflicted gunshot wound and was transported to the hospital, and he later died. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but actually Evergreen High School didn't have a full-time school resource officer for about 10 months. So basically the deputy assigned to the school was on medical leave, but one of the deputies who was just like filling in for that day at the school left the campus between 10:30 and 10:45 to respond to a traffic crash. So I'll get into more like about that later on, but so one of the victims was Matthew Silverstone, who was an 18-year-old. He's now in critical condition, and his uncle spoke out about the incident and said a lot about kind of shootings and like Matthew as a person. He said, quote, "He doesn't have a mean bone in his body. He would go out of his way to help anybody." So I am going to link the GoFundMe for Matthew's like family and Matthew's recovery like in the episode description, so please check that out. And then the other gun violence victim has not been publicly identified, but they are also in serious condition as well. So I can't even imagine what it must be like to be in the shoes of the family, like the parents right now, this just like anyone with any sort of relationship to these people, how terrifying it is, like how much uncertainty there is. No one should ever be put in this situation, and it like breaks my heart that anyone is. So yeah, I'm so sorry to anyone who has experienced this before. So going back to the shooter himself, he had displayed a lot of concerning tendencies before the shooting happened. He was very active on social media platforms, like posting white supremacist and anti-Semitic content. So like very concerning stuff was happening. His TikTok profile photo was actually a picture of the University of California, Santa Barbara shooter who killed 6 people. So a lot of these like school shooters are like inspired by other ones. So that's just like really like disturbing to even think about. So his behavior was so disturbing that it actually caught the attention of the Anti-Defamation League, which basically it fights against things like anti-Semitism, bigotry, like really any sort of like untrue, like targeted statements towards marginalized groups of people. And the shooter was also active on the Violent Gore website, which basically just portrays violence against people. It's very easy to access, unfortunately, and other school shooters have been active on that platform before, and that kind of like feeds into their like kind of ideas, and it's just like not a good site at all. So Cloudflare, which like basically allows for the hosting of the site that he was active on, doesn't want to take it down. They say they don't have the capacity to remove the content, but there's obviously a lot of like pushback on that. Like, okay, like this content is very concerning and these shooters are using it to like fuel their ideologies, like it should be removed, because on top of just violent content, there's also like hateful content, like white supremacist content, anti-Semitic content, all sorts of stuff like that. So the FBI launched an investigation against him, but they were never able to identify him because he didn't have his name on his socials. So nothing really came out of the investigation, unfortunately, since there just wasn't enough information about it. So a lot of people, of course, have been speaking out about this incident. Like the public information officer for the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office said, quote, "This is the scariest thing you could ever think that could happen. And these parents were really frightened, and so were the kids. And I know we always say not again, and here we are." So I think that's really important to look at, because it's like, yeah, we think like, okay, we're not going to let this happen again. We're going to change things. But then like, it seems like no change is actually happening. Like, it just feels so like utterly like helpless. Like, is our world ever going to change, or is it going to just keep getting worse? So that's why I think it's so important to keep talking about this. Even if there are periods where it seems like things are getting better, don't stop talking about the importance of like gun violence prevention, advocacy, and stricter gun laws, and mental health support for victims and school shooting survivors. That all of that is like so important. So students at Evergreen are now asking for a slower transition back to school. So many of them are like understandably very traumatized by the event. To think that they would have to go from that like traumatizing, horrible event to then going back to school, being expected to study, being expected to do their sports and clubs and like act like everything's normal when they just went through like a life-threatening event it's just, it's a horrible thing that kids have to be going through this, and then they're expected to just integrate back into society and just kind of move on. But there is no, like, you can't just move on from this type of thing. It's like, it takes so much to like, it's such a traumatizing event, and I think there needs to be so much more support that's accessible and free for students after they've gone through something like this. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But so as I said before, like one of the deputies that had responded to like a car incident, so they weren't there at the time of the shooting. So the sheriff's office plans to rearrange staff to ensure a full-time SRO is present at Evergreen High School at all times to just make sure that it's safer and more secure. So it's good that they're making that change. But I think, yeah, it's important to talk about what can we do, because it can feel really helpless and just like a cycle that keeps going on, but that doesn't mean that you have no power to like make an impact in gun violence prevention. So back in our junior year, Ahana and I hosted a gun violence prevention workshop. We made a whole episode about that, so check that out if you're interested, and let us know if you want more information on kind of the process of what that looks like how do you host your own workshop, or like how do you get the materials, that sort of thing. So that's a great opportunity to educate people in your community, whether it's your high school, your college, your middle school, about how we can be safe with guns in society, and also just bringing awareness to the issue. I think just speaking about it is really powerful, and letting people share their stories and feel connected by this group of people who also cares about this issue, because it can often feel like we just move past it. But like seeing a group of people who's affected by it and who wants to speak about it and wants to make a difference, I think it can be really powerful. And then beyond just like kind of like hosting your own workshop, it's also important to just educate yourself. So one thing that we've talked about in the past that we learned a lot about this from Colorado ceasefire are red flag laws. So these are super important. They're also known as extreme risk protection orders, so ERPOs, and they basically allow courts to temporarily access or restrict access to a person's firearm if they're showing indications that they might harm another person or themselves. So this can be requested through like a family member or someone who knows the person, or if you want it to be anonymous, it can be requested through law enforcement. So you can go to like a law enforcement officer, like a police station, and request a red flag order or extreme risk protection order against someone, and then there will be a hearing and a judge will decide if their firearm should be taken away. So those can be like really important in restricting access when someone's like mentally struggling and is displaying signs that like they might like do something drastic and life-changing. It's also important, I think, to learn about safe carrying. So making sure, like, if with parents, like making sure kids don't have access to guns, like doing extensive research on what the process of safe carrying like looks like, safe storage, sorry, that's what I meant. Like looking at the process of like safe storage, like setting passcodes, like making sure that it really can only be put in the hands of a responsible person who is not going to use it for any violent activities. And then, of course, like safe to tell is an anonymous way to report someone if you think someone's exhibiting any like scary behaviors or signs. If someone like says something really worrying, like do not be afraid to do something about that. Don't be embarrassed. Like you could be saving people's lives. Like never say, oh, like I would get made fun of for this, or like, oh, like, you know, safe to tell has this bad rap. No. Like just report it and you will not regret that. So yeah. I think it's also important to look at like kind of the education side of this, like having more education in schools on how to address like concerning social media posts. Like if your classmate and your peers like posting really concerning things on social media, like how can you approach that situation? Like who do you talk to? I think a lot of the time it's like students just don't know like where do I start? Who do I talk to? Like I don't know what to do. So I think like learning more about that and like having education about that in schools is super important. And then I want to talk a little bit more about the mental health aspect of this. So we in the past interviewed Lucy Sarkisian, who was a school shooting survivor, and that was a super insightful interview. If you haven't watched it, I would highly recommend it. But essentially, like victims of school shootings do not often have access to mental health support that's free. It seems like something that you would just assume like, oh yeah, they should get like free therapy or free counseling, but that's not always the case. So Heather Martin, who's a Columbine activist or Columbine survivor and like an activist for gun violence prevention, told CPR News that funding for mental health services after a mass violence event like a school shooting often runs out while survivors are still dealing with the trauma. So maybe they get access to support for like a week, but obviously you're not going to heal and like be fine after a week. And then like after that, the free support is just like used up and there's nothing you can do. So IMatter Colorado is a great resource that provides like free therapy sessions for people. So if you feel like you need that, definitely check that out. I'll also link that in the bio as well. I think this is just a hard time, like being like a student, especially like knowing that this could happen at any time, like reading and hearing about these stories of it is terrifying. And I think I feel like I just want to like validate like the fear around that. Like it's valid to be scared and we shouldn't have to be scared, but unfortunately that's the way things are. But I think we shouldn't accept that that's the way things are. Like we deserve a better world. And yeah, so if there's one thing I want you guys to take away from this, it's keep talking. Like never stop talking about gun violence, never stop talking about the shootings, never let them get overshadowed, never let them kind of like, never let people forget about them after like a day. It's so important because it's an ongoing struggle to have stricter gun laws. Colorado has done a lot. Like they've raised the minimum age for purchasing a gun from 18 to 21. They've implemented red flag laws. We've definitely made progress, but there's so much more progress to make as well. So, we're going to keep, of course, covering this issue and talking more about what you can do. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, if you have any episode ideas, if there's a specific thing related to gun violence that you want us to talk about, just let us know and we would love to cover those topics. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode. I know it was a little bit different, but I hope you guys still enjoyed it. I'm not sure what the next week's episode is going to be since Ahana's filming it, but I know it'll be great, so tune into that one as well. And thank you guys so much for listening. I hope everyone has a good week. Bye!